Usually the way this question is asked to me runs more along the lines of why would a white guy from Mississippi who works for Rupert Murdoch at the most conservative newspaper in America write this book? So I've given you the answer to that question too, in a sense. But that one of the things I have learned in my 16 years at the Wall Street Journal, which are ending in about a week, I'm ending my tenure at the Wall Street Journal, and going to do some teaching and write for the Washington Post and do some other things. But one of the things I did learn at the Wall Street Journal was the idea that that money really does explain most things, and it explains it more than immorality and more than kind of theoretical things like racism and such, and that and the explanation for so much of what you saw in the film and what's written about in the book, it's not so much. I mean, all of this does add up to, I think, the greatest moral failure of our society. I mean, the greatest moral failure is slavery itself, the first version of slavery. But then the second, and not lesser, but the other greatest moral failure was that somehow we performed this miraculous feat as a society of defeating slavery and eliminating slavery, and then we gave it back. Then we failed, and we failed in actually creating citizenship for African Americans in the century after the end of slavery. And the real explanations for all of that, in my view, are fundamentally economic, but then magnified and accelerated and helped by all sorts of other terribly immoral things that went along with it. I would say just one other thing about the film, particularly the excerpts that you saw tonight, may not have completely conveyed some of the things that the film does and that the book perhaps does even more of that might be of particular interest to this audience. Because a lot of what you saw there sort of focused on some degree the industrial slavery that was going on, but also the agricultural. But first off, when we talk about slavery in the book and in the film, we're talking about slavery. We're not talking about bad times, or being really poor, or being called a bad name, not getting to vote. Those things are not slavery. Those are very bad things, but they're not slavery. And slavery is a word that gets thrown around sometimes, in my opinion, too much. And in some respects, sometimes it's used in ways that I think actually dishonors people who actually were enslaved in the past. But what these projects are about is a system of slavery in which people were being captured, forced to work against their will. They were being bought and sold, receiving no compensation. I mean, we're talking about actual systems of slavery, not just bad times. So that's a key thing. And the idea that forms of slavery persisted in a very significant way in the United States deep into the 20th century, right up into the beginning of World War II. And there are instances of these things that continued even beyond that. But as a well-organized system that was affecting the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, this thing persisted all the way up to the World War II period.